Most people think intelligence is about knowing things, collecting facts, accumulating information, being able to recall dates, quote sources, demonstrate expertise. And that's exactly why most intelligent people never become powerful. Because they've confused knowledge with intelligence, and intelligence with wisdom, and wisdom with the kind of dangerous understanding that actually changes outcomes. Francis Bacon understood something that most people die never learning. Intelligence that doesn't translate to power is just entertainment. Knowledge that doesn't give you advantage is just decoration. And thinking that doesn't help you win is just mental masturbation. Bacon didn't pursue knowledge for its own sake. He pursued it as a weapon, a tool, a mechanism for gaining advantage over people who were less informed, less strategic, less willing to think in ways that made them dangerous. And over his lifetime, he distilled this approach into lessons that separate those who are merely educated from those who are dangerously intelligent. Lessons that make you see things others miss, think in ways others can't, act in ways others won't, and win in situations where others don't even realize there's a game being played. These aren't comfortable lessons. They're not the kind of thing taught in schools or celebrated in polite society. Because dangerously intelligent people are threatening. They see through social games. They exploit cognitive weaknesses. They win by understanding what others don't even know exists. So if you're looking for feel-good platitudes about the value of education, this isn't it. But if you want to understand how to make intelligence actually useful, how to think in ways that give you real advantage, how to become the kind of smart that makes you dangerous, then these are Francis Bacon's 8 ruthless lessons. Lesson 1. Most people are not thinking. They're rearranging their prejudices. Bacon's first and most brutal lesson. The vast majority of what passes for thinking is actually just rationalization. People start with conclusions, emotions, preferences, tribal beliefs, and then use their intelligence to justify those pre-existing positions. They're not thinking, they're defending. And the smarter they are, the better they are at creating sophisticated justifications for beliefs they never actually reasoned their way into. This is critical to understand because it means most people's intelligence works against them. It makes them more sophisticated in their delusions, better at constructing rationales for things that aren't true, more confident in positions that aren't justified. Their intelligence becomes a weapon they use against themselves, creating elaborate intellectual structures built on foundations of bias and emotion. Dangerously intelligent people recognize this. They see that most people, even very smart people, are not actually open to evidence or reason. They've already decided what they believe, and they're using their considerable mental capabilities to defend those beliefs against any information that threatens them. This means arguing with them is pointless, presenting evidence is useless, because they're not in truth-seeking mode, they're in defense mode. Once you understand this, your entire approach to influence changes. You stop trying to convince people with logic. You stop presenting facts. You stop making rational arguments, because you recognize that people don't arrive at their beliefs rationally. So rational arguments won't change those beliefs. Instead, you figure out what they already believe, what emotional needs those beliefs serve, and you either work within that framework or you manipulate the emotional foundations that support their beliefs. The ruthless application is this. While others are having intellectual debates thinking they're changing minds, you're operating at the level of emotion and identity and tribal belonging that actually determines belief. You're not trying to make people think differently, you're making them feel differently, and feelings drive beliefs far more effectively than arguments ever will. Lesson 2. Knowledge without application is worthless. Bacon was vicious about this. He despised what he called sterile philosophy, knowledge pursued for its own sake. Learning that never translated to action or outcomes. He believed that the only knowledge worth having was knowledge you could use, knowledge that gave you capability, knowledge that translated to power. Everything else was intellectual masturbation, impressive perhaps, entertaining maybe, but ultimately worthless. This separates dangerously intelligent people from merely educated ones. Educated people collect knowledge. They read extensively. They can discuss complex topics. They know things. But dangerously intelligent people only care about knowledge that translates to advantage. They're not learning for the sake of learning. They're learning for the sake of winning. This means they're extremely selective about what they invest mental energy in. They don't pursue knowledge in areas that won't benefit them. They don't waste time becoming experts in topics that don't translate to capability or power. They're ruthlessly focused on learning things that will actually change outcomes in domains they care about. And critically, they don't stop at understanding. They immediately think about application. How can this be used? What advantage does this give? What can I do with this that I couldn't do before? They're not collecting information. They're collecting weapons, tools, capabilities, and if something doesn't translate to actual capability, they discard it as noise. The ruthless lesson here is that most of what you think you need to know, you don't. Most of what educated people spend time learning is useless to them. They're pursuing breadth of knowledge when they should be pursuing depth of capability. They're trying to know everything when they should be trying to master things that matter. Dangerously intelligent people focus. They become extremely capable in specific domains that give them advantage, and they ignore everything else as distraction. Lesson 3. People reveal everything. If you're patient enough to watch. Bacon understood that you don't need people to tell you the truth. You just need to watch them long enough, because people reveal their true nature, intentions, and capabilities through patterns of behavior that they can't fully control. They might lie with words, but their actions, especially patterns of action over time, tell the truth. Most people are impatient. They want to know who someone is immediately. So they ask questions, have conversations, try to assess character through interaction, and they get performed versions of people. Masks, presentations, not truth. Dangerously intelligent people take a different approach. They watch, quietly, over time. They notice patterns, inconsistencies, the gaps between what someone says and what they do, the differences between how someone behaves in different contexts, the changes in behavior under stress. This patience is a superpower, because while others are being fooled by presentations, you're seeing reality. While others are taking people at their word, you're observing what their behavior actually reveals. While others are being manipulated by conscious performances, you're reading unconscious patterns that tell the truth. The ruthless application is that you stop trusting what people say and start cataloging what they do. You become a behavioral analyst rather than a conversational participant. You're not trying to understand people through what they tell you. You're understanding them through what they reveal when they think no one's paying attention, through patterns they don't know they're displaying, through the accumulated evidence of their actual behavior rather than their claimed intentions. And critically, you use this understanding strategically. You know who people actually are beneath their presentations. You know what they'll really do under pressure. You know what they actually value versus what they claim to value. And that knowledge gives you massive advantage in predicting and influencing behavior because you're working with reality rather than performance. Lesson 4. The masses are predictably irrational. Exploit this. Bacon had no romantic illusions about human nature or collective wisdom. He observed that most people, most of the time, make decisions based on emotion, cognitive bias, tribal belonging, and social proof rather than reason or evidence. And rather than finding this depressing, he found it useful, because predictable irrationality can be exploited by those who understand it. This is one of the darkest lessons. Most people are not rational actors. They don't weigh evidence carefully. They don't think through implications. They don't check their biases. They react emotionally. They follow the crowd. They believe what feels good or what their tribe believes. They're influenced by framing, by authority, by repetition, by social pressure, and all of these mechanisms can be manipulated by someone who understands them. Dangerously intelligent people don't get frustrated by human irrationality. They study it. They understand cognitive biases. They know how framing affects perception. They recognize how social proof drives behavior. They understand the power of authority, reciprocity, scarcity, and consistency in influencing decisions. And they use these mechanisms deliberately to get outcomes they want. This doesn't mean they're being unethical, necessarily. It just means they're being realistic. They recognize that appealing to reason doesn't work with most people most of the time. So they appeal to emotion, to tribal identity, to social proof, to authority. They frame things in ways that trigger desired cognitive responses. They structure situations to take advantage of known biases. They're not trying to make people think rationally. They're working with how people actually think, which is mostly irrationally. The ruthless truth is that those who understand and exploit human irrationality have massive advantages over those who naively expect rational responses to rational arguments. While others are frustrated that facts and logic don't convince people, dangerously intelligent people are busy using psychology and emotion to actually change behavior and outcomes. Lesson 5. Your enemies are your best teachers. Bacon didn't just tolerate opposition, he valued it. He saw his enemies, his critics, his opponents as sources of valuable information that friends and allies couldn't provide. Because your friends tell you what you want to hear. Your enemies tell you what you need to know, even if they're trying to hurt you with it. Most people avoid criticism. They surround themselves with supporters. They create echo chambers where their views are validated and their weaknesses are never mentioned. This feels good, but it makes them stupid. Because they never get accurate feedback. They never see their blind spots. They never learn where they're actually vulnerable. So they operate with false confidence based on incomplete information. Dangerously intelligent people seek out opposition, not to argue, but to learn. They want to know what their critics see that their supporters don't. They want to understand where their arguments are weak. They want to identify where they're vulnerable before that vulnerability is exploited in a situation that matters. They treat criticism, even hostile criticism, as free intelligence about their own weaknesses. This requires ego management that most people don't have. You have to be secure enough to hear that you're wrong, that you're flawed, that you're vulnerable, without getting defensive. You have to be able to extract the useful information from criticism even when it's delivered with hostility or bad faith. You have to want truth more than you want validation. The ruthless application is that you actively cultivate critics. You put yourself in environments where your ideas will be challenged. You expose your work to hostile review. You seek out people who think you're wrong and you listen carefully to why, not because you're going to agree with them, but because even hostile criticism contains information about how you're perceived and where your actual weaknesses are. And that information, properly used, makes you stronger. Lesson 6. Comfort is the enemy of intelligence. Bacon observed that once people become comfortable, they stop learning, they stop questioning, they stop adapting, they settle into patterns that worked in the past, and they resist anything that would require them to think differently or change behavior. And this comfort-induced stagnation makes them progressively stupider as the world changes around them. Dangerously intelligent people deliberately avoid comfort. Not physical comfort necessarily, but intellectual comfort. The comfort of settled opinions. The comfort of familiar frameworks. The comfort of not having to think hard. They actively seek discomfort because discomfort is where growth happens, where new understanding emerges, where adaptation occurs. This means deliberately exposing yourself to ideas that threaten your worldview, reading things you expect to disagree with, engaging with perspectives that make you uncomfortable, questioning beliefs that feel foundational, not because you're trying to abandon everything you believe, but because you're testing it. Because you want to know whether what you believe is actually justified or just comfortable. It also means taking on challenges that force you to learn, that push you beyond your current capabilities, that require you to think in new ways. Most people avoid this. They stay in domains where they're already competent, where they can perform comfortably. Dangerously intelligent people deliberately enter domains where they're incompetent, where they have to struggle, where they're forced to develop new capabilities. The ruthless lesson is that intellectual growth requires intellectual discomfort. If you're always comfortable in your thinking, you're not growing. You're stagnating. You're becoming progressively less capable of adapting to new information and new situations. You're making yourself stupid through comfort. Dangerously intelligent people choose discomfort deliberately because they value capability and growth more than comfort and certainty. Lesson 7. Systems beat individuals. Master systems. Bacon understood that individual capability, while important, is ultimately limited by the systems you're operating within. A brilliant person in a bad system will be outperformed by a mediocre person in a good system. So dangerously intelligent people don't just work on becoming more capable. They work on understanding and exploiting or changing the systems they operate within. This is a meta-level intelligence that most people never develop. They focus on individual competence, on being better at their job, on developing skills. And all of that is fine, but it's operating at the wrong level. Because systems, structures, rules, incentives, these shape outcomes far more than individual effort does. And if you understand systems, if you can see how they work and what leverage points exist, you can achieve with less effort what others can't achieve with much more. Think about this practically. Someone working incredibly hard within a system that doesn't reward their efforts will fail. Someone working moderately hard within a system that amplifies their efforts will succeed. The difference isn't individual capability, it's system understanding. Dangerously intelligent people learn to read systems, to identify what's actually being rewarded versus what's claimed to be rewarded, to find leverage points where small inputs create large outputs, to exploit structural advantages rather than just trying to outwork everyone. This also means they're willing to change systems when they can't exploit them. They don't just accept rules and structures as given. They question whether those rules and structures serve them. And if they don't, they work to change them. Most people take systems as fixed and try to succeed within them. Dangerously intelligent people treat systems as malleable and shape them to their advantage when possible. The ruthless application is that you stop thinking about individual competition and start thinking about systemic advantage. You're not trying to be the hardest worker. You're trying to be in systems that reward your particular capabilities. You're not trying to outcompete everyone through effort. You're trying to position yourself where the system works in your favor, and when it doesn't, you change the system or you move to a different one. Lesson 8. Truth is a weapon, but timing is everything. Bacon's final ruthless lesson. Truth is powerful, but truth deployed at the wrong time is worthless or even harmful. Dangerously intelligent people don't just know things. They know when to reveal what they know and when to keep it concealed. Because knowledge is only power when it's used strategically, and strategy requires timing. Most people can't keep secrets. They know something and they immediately share it. They discover a truth and they have to tell people. They gain an advantage through information and they give it away through the need to demonstrate that they know things others don't. This makes them feel smart, but it makes them powerless. Because they're spending their information capital for ego satisfaction rather than strategic advantage. Dangerously intelligent people hoard information. They know things that others don't know, and they reveal that knowledge only when doing so serves their interests. They understand that information has timing, that the same piece of information can be worthless now and devastating later, that sometimes the power of knowledge comes from others not knowing that you know it. This requires discipline that most people lack. You have to be comfortable knowing something important without telling anyone. You have to resist the urge to demonstrate your knowledge for validation or status. You have to be willing to appear less informed than you are because revealing what you know would burn an advantage you're not ready to use yet. But it also requires strategic thinking. You're always evaluating. If I reveal this now, what happens? If I wait, when would be the optimal time? Who benefits from this information being known and who is harmed? How can I deploy this knowledge in a way that maximizes my advantage? You're not just collecting information. You're managing it like a strategic resource. The ruthless truth is that most people give away their advantages by talking too much. They reveal what they know. They expose their strategies. They broadcast their intentions. And then they wonder why they can't win. Dangerously intelligent people keep silent. They observe. They collect information. And they deploy it only when timing maximizes impact. They understand that in information warfare, and all conflict is information warfare to some degree, silence is often more powerful than speech. Synthesis, the dangerously intelligent mindset. These 8 lessons, when fully internalized, create something that makes most people uncomfortable. A mindset that sees through social games, that treats knowledge as weaponizable, that understands and exploits human psychology, that operates strategically rather than emotionally, that values truth but deploys it tactically, that seeks discomfort and opposition because they create growth, that focuses ruthlessly on applicable knowledge and ignores everything else. This is not the mindset celebrated in academic institutions. It's not what motivational speakers talk about. It's not comfortable or inspiring in conventional ways, because it's based on cold understanding of how power actually works, how influence actually functions, how human psychology actually operates. And that understanding, when you have it, when you internalize it, makes you dangerous. Dangerous doesn't mean violent, doesn't mean unethical. It means capable of achieving outcomes that others can't, capable of seeing things others miss, capable of influencing situations in ways that seem almost magical to people who don't understand the principles you're operating from. It means you're playing a different game at a different level with different rules, and people who don't understand those rules have no chance of competing with you. Bacon embodied this. He rose from modest origins to the highest positions of power in one of the most competitive environments in history. He did it not through birthright or luck or even exceptional talent in conventional terms. He did it through dangerous intelligence, through understanding principles that others didn't understand, through thinking in ways that gave him advantages others couldn't match, through being ruthlessly focused on knowledge that translated to power and utterly dismissive of knowledge that didn't. The price of dangerous intelligence. But there's a cost, and Bacon paid it. Dangerously intelligent people are isolated. They can't fully connect with people who don't think at their level. They see through too much. They understand too much about human psychology and social manipulation to participate naively in normal social interactions. They're always analyzing, always strategic, always aware of games being played that others don't even notice. This creates loneliness, because genuine connection requires some level of shared understanding, and when you understand things at a level most people don't reach, you're operating alone. You can't share your actual thinking with most people because they wouldn't understand it or they'd be threatened by it. You have to maintain presentations, even with people close to you, because your actual worldview would be too uncomfortable for them. You also become threatening to others. People sense when someone is smarter than them in ways that matter. When someone is playing games at levels they don't understand. When someone has advantages they can't match. And that sensing creates fear and hostility. Dangerously intelligent people often face opposition not because they're doing anything wrong, but because their very existence threatens others. They make people feel inadequate or manipulated or outmaneuvered, and that creates enemies. Bacon experienced both. He was isolated, misunderstood, frequently attacked by people who sensed his dangerous intelligence, even if they couldn't articulate what made him threatening. He paid social and emotional costs for thinking differently, for being smarter in ways that made others uncomfortable, for operating at levels others couldn't access. So understand what you're choosing if you internalize these lessons. You're choosing capability over comfort, power over popularity, strategic advantage over social ease, truth over pleasant illusions. And that choice, once made, is difficult to reverse. Because once you see how things actually work, once you understand the principles that govern power and influence, you can't go back to naive participation in social games. You're awake. And awakeness is isolating. The ultimate question. Francis Bacon's 8 ruthless lessons make you dangerously smart. They give you advantages most people will never have. They let you see through what others take at face value. They help you win in situations where others don't even understand what winning means. But they also separate you from comfortable ignorance and naive social participation. The question you have to answer is whether that trade is worth it. Whether you want to be dangerously intelligent with all the costs that come with it, or whether you'd rather stay comfortably intelligent, knowing things that don't particularly threaten anyone and not understanding enough about power and influence to be truly dangerous. Most people will choose comfort. They'll stay at levels of intelligence that feel good and make them fit in and don't create too much opposition. They'll collect knowledge for decoration rather than power. They'll think in ways that confirm their beliefs rather than challenge them. They'll stay safely within conventional bounds of intelligence that society celebrates because it's not threatening. But some people, a small percentage, will choose to become dangerously intelligent. They'll internalize these ruthless lessons. They'll develop capabilities and understanding that give them real advantages. They'll become the kind of smart that makes them powerful rather than just educated. That makes them dangerous rather than just knowledgeable. Bacon was one of those people. He chose dangerous intelligence even though he knew the costs. He pursued knowledge as power rather than decoration. He thought in ways that gave him advantages others couldn't match, and he became one of the most influential figures of his era because of it. The 8 lessons are here. They're yours if you want them, but understand what you're taking. You're not just learning to be smarter. You're learning to be smart in ways that matter, in ways that change outcomes, in ways that make you dangerous. And once you become dangerous through intelligence, you can't become safe again. You can't go back to comfortable ignorance. You're stuck being someone who sees too much, understands too much, and operates at levels most people never access. Whether that's a blessing or a curse depends entirely on what you value. Power or peace, capability or comfort, truth or pleasant illusions. Francis Bacon chose power, capability, and truth, and he paid the price for it, but he also changed the world through it. The question is what you'll choose, and that choice, once you understand these 8 ruthless lessons, is the only one that really matters.